I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. Most people think networking means swapping business cards and awkward small talk. But what if everything you've been taught about it is wrong? Today, leadership expert Brad Englert joins us to reveal a smarter, more authentic way to build influence and trust, one rooted in genuine relationships, not transactions. From his decades at Accenture and the University of Texas, Brad shows how to create real human connection in an age of Zoom fatigue and AI overload. If you've ever felt that networking was fake or forced, this episode will change how you think about relationships and how you build them. Brad, great to have you on the show, hailing from the great town of Austin, Texas. And I know we're going to talk about a variety of things relative to leadership and influence and authenticity. But before I asked my first question, I was thinking about when did I first start getting introduced to this idea that it's important to network in your business community. And I think when I first started this little business back, 1992, 93, I'm kind of dating myself here. That was the first thing that people said, you got to join a networking organization. And I think back in that, it was sort of like a leads club. There was something called the Allie Lassen's networking group. And so it was just a bunch of business people getting together, having coffee at 7:00 in the morning. And, somebody would give a speech and then you would hand out business cards and you sort of committed to working with each other if you possibly could. And it kind of worked, it kind of got us off the ground a little bit. But, what's your sense about that kind of way that we've been told, especially if we're new in the business of being a leader, to network and maybe even touch upon how networking has changed since you started, because now we have so many communications that are virtual.
Yeah. Well, I've been to a lot of networking events in my 40 years in my career. I've never found one customer at any of those events.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I had one fellow who gave me his card, and a week later sent me an email asking for a donation for his not-for-profit. It's like, I don't even know you.
Right. And then if you got a
Leave me alone.
networking person in the room, they started trying to sell you their wares. Yeah, I get it. But
And so when I started with the firm, Arthur Anderson, which became Anderson Consulting, which became Accenture, I was taught from the very first day that the people you're working with, whether it's your peer in the organization or your client, someday might be your customer, might be your boss. You have to treat them with respect and treat it as a long-term relationship. And the fellow I started with at the firm became the chief information officer of a huge organization the same year I became the chief information officer at the University of Texas at Austin, 27 years later. So it actually came true.
Right. What goes around comes around, right?
That's right.
Well, so you're sort of making the point that the old school way of networking, where you go to a meeting and throw out business cards into a fishbowl and you pull something out, whatever you do to be able to connect with people, doesn't really work. It sounds like what you're sort of saying, and I'm reading between the lines, that it's not very authentic. It's pretty, mechanical. Not any play upon your reference towards technology, but then what do we do? Let's just assume I'm a young manager in a company and I want to grow my relationships within the company, but I also see the value of growing relationships outside of the company for a variety of other reasons.
Yep.
How do I do that internally without it feeling presumptuous? And how do I do it externally?
Oh, that's a great question. You really have 2 spheres of influence. The internal sphere are those people closest to you. So your boss, your direct reports, all your staff, executive leaders, you're probably interacting with your boss once a week, your
Mm,
direct reports once a week. So you have an opportunity to build a relationship there. Then you have external uh, relationships, your customers, peers and influencers, and strategic vendor partners. So you don't have to build relationships with everyone. You need to be strategic and intentional and just start with your boss and ask 3 questions. What are your goals and aspirations? What is your
mm.
boss trying to achieve? And if I can help my boss be successful, then I will be successful. And in the consulting uh, realm, it's driven by sales. So how can I help sell work? Can I help volunteer to write a proposal? Be cognizant of billing on time, doing all the basics that would make my boss successful. And then if I can help them set and manage expectations. And I was really bad at that early in my career. I would say yes to everything, which was really dumb. And I learned to, use my words. If I needed something, I needed to tell them. And if I needed help, I needed to ask for it. And then third, genuinely care about their success. If you do that with your boss, your direct reports, your customers, you will be very successful.
So that sounds like extraordinarily sound advice for anybody who is trying to be successful in business. However, excuse me, like my question seems to now want to go to a different area where what you just said sounds like just good business. Like it's like everybody should do that. Everybody should ask these questions of their boss. Tell me if I'm wrong, but when I started thinking about developing a relationship, you hear all the time, you don't have to like these people, you just have to work with them. I may not necessarily have a real I might be able to answer the questions that you just posed and know the answers to
Mhm.
them because I've asked my boss, but I may not have a relationship with them. It's more transactional. You do this, I do that. We have this sort of agreement. This is how it works. But what I think about relationship is I get to know the person. I get to know the whole person, like maybe even
Right.
them outside of work where we just sit down over a beer or a cup of coffee and we don't necessarily talk about business. We talk about their kid doing soccer practice or
Hmm.
where they went on
Sure.
vacation last year. Are you including that part in your model around networking?
Absolutely. And I would always meet with my boss in their office, my direct reports in their office, my customers where they're living, my peers. So I wanted my my direct report to see me coming to them, and I wanted their teams to see me coming every week to help. And when you meet in someone's office or virtually, frankly, you look around and say, well, what photos do they have of the kids? And
Mm,
what I had one peer who was the vice president for public safety. He had all this Ohio State memorabilia because he got his PhD there. Well, that was my best client. And
mm,
it's like we just bonded immediately because we loved the university.
mhm.
And so you need to get beyond the superficial and be strategic and intentional. I didn't meet with all my vendors, but those I spent millions of dollars with, yeah, I would meet with them. And same thing with customers. I'm of the belief that the customer's not always right. Some customers you need to fire if they're not
Yeah,
treating you well.
yeah.
So, you know, 80 to 90% of Accenture's customers are repeat customers. Well, why is that? Because success breeds success
Mm.
and builds trust and is not superficial. So what I coach my direct reports to do is the same thing. I said, just meet with your peers, put it on your calendar once a month. You go meet with them. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
And someone
Yeah.
said, "Brad, what you're saying is just common sense." But not everyone has common sense.
I think that part, I mean, if I were to put myself on this on the side of someone saying, "It sounds good, Brad, but, ain't gonna work very well," because they're so focused on getting the work done, and they just don't have the time, they don't see it as value add. I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and, I said, "Why don't you go and actually talk to that person? Why don't you go have
Yeah,
coffee with them?" And he
yeah,
goes, "Yeah, I know. She's been in the business, because she was just recently hired, been here for 9 months. I really don't know her, and she really doesn't know me." So I said, "Well,
mhm,
go and find out about her, go have a
yep.
coffee or whatever." And I think that people get so caught up in just being transactional with their own work and the work with others, we don't set any time aside for that. And
Right.
I wonder about, tell me what you think about this, Brad. If I don't want to be a burden on somebody else by saying, "Hey, I got no reason to talk to you, Brad. I just want to go out and get to know you better. Thanks, Dean. Really appreciate the gesture, but I'm really busy." Does that how do we try to create these relationships without being a pain in the ass?
Well, if you meet with someone and you understand what they're trying to achieve, their goals and aspirations, if you can't help, then move on. You don't need
Okay.
to be a pain in the ass. And
Right.
I had customers call me, potential customers, say, "Can you help me with this?" Well, sometimes I could not help them with this, but I would know someone who could help them with that.
Yeah.
And that would pay forward. And I had a woman who worked for me, read the manuscript of the book, said, "My story's not in there." I said, "What story?" "When you ordered me to go meet with that IT manager who hated us."
Mm.
"Oh, yeah, that story." And, the prior central IT organization had this fire drill culture, heroics were rewarded, and
Mm.
I needed to change it to a proactive customer service organization. And so I asked her to go out and first apologize for all the prior bad behavior because the organization was not truthful. And so just apologize for that and say, going forward, we want to have a stronger partnership. And she met once a month for about 7, 8 months. And as we got more consistent, as we got more transparent, as we became more collaborative and proactive, that manager became an advocate for us. And her boss, I met with her boss, who also had a bunch of bad behavior in the prior regime, and I just apologized that we're not gonna work like that anymore,
Mm.
and he became an advocate.
How do we do this when our team is spread out from all over the country? How do
Great
we
question.
network? I was just with a group down in Tacoma about 3 weeks ago. Great guys, big company. They're scattered all over the country. They have most of their meetings are Zoom or WebEx. They maybe see each other a few times a year, but it's mostly for business purposes, this or that kind of thing. And so they didn't really have that interpersonal knowing of each other. How do we do that when we can't just, "Hey, we bump into you over at the cafeteria. Why don't
Right.
you come sit over here?" Like in high school. Come sit over here. Since we don't have that opportunity the same way that we used to before COVID and before all the technology, how do we be proactive in this environment that we now live?
Um, it's difficult, but you just
Yeah.
need to be intentional.
Yeah.
So I had for a couple of years at Accenture, I had a team of 90 consultants across North America, and we would go to different projects, whether it's Whirlpool in Benton Harbor or Deutsche Bank in New York City or Atlanta for Bell South. And I would get on a good old fashioned conference call every Friday with my direct reports. And we would talk about what's going well, what could be different, what could we be doing differently, what are the opportunities coming up, who can we put in those roles and give them stretch opportunities. And then I would bring the team together twice a year in person, and we would do fun stuff. And then I would um, go out to each project site, and I called it my Winnebago tour.
Hmm.
And I would show up in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and I would meet with the client, ask how things are going. I would meet with my people, all levels. So not just my direct reports, but all levels. I'd take them to dinner. And when we did our 360 reviews, everyone loved my Winnebago tours because
Mm,
I got out there. It it wasn't that hard, it'd be a day in each project, and they really appreciated that I understood what their career goals were, and I helped them grow into those roles they wanted to grow into.
mm.
And so I say it's a mix of virtual and in person.
So, but can you be intentional about creating some sort of a networking opportunity with a person with whom you will only connect over Zoom? Like, could I call you up and say, Brad, or text you, email and say, um, yeah, we could talk about the business, but I just want to spend maybe 15 minutes just to you to get to know you better, and know how I can support you more. Is that appropriate in a virtual environment? And does it get the same bang for the buck as if we were face to face?
I would say if you're on Zoom or where I can see you and talk to you is effective. I think just trading messages on LinkedIn less so.
Mm.
Um, you know, I I think you really need to ask, how can I help this person? And if you can't, then don't waste their
Then
time
move
or
on.
yours.
I saw some data a couple of days ago from a healthcare organization. I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but there are times when doctors meet with patients just because of the issue that happens, and then there's the annual wellness meeting. It's sort of we
Hmm.
take a big back strategic perspective. How are things going? And it's usually something that some private practices do on a regular basis, usually yearly. And those that seem to do that have better quality and better engagement scores with their patients. And I
Sure.
think this is me just reading between the lines here is that we are developing a relationship with that patient that goes beyond the transactional relationship of you got an owie, let me fix it. Now we're talking about the whole person, and the whole person feels appreciated that you even asked, and therefore my perception of the value that you're providing me goes up. Hence, what you're
Right.
saying seems to also align with that.
That's right.
How about you mentioned that your work at Accenture, I think you'd said that you worked a lot in the IT space, that was your
Hmm.
vertical. Is there something about the person who's attracted to technology that doesn't always make them great networkers?
Yeah,
Like
I'd say IT people are not the touchy-feely,
yeah,
typical touchy-feely,
give me a bunch of
and
ones and zeros, I'm fine. But go out and have
right.
coffee with somebody and
Well
chit chat.
well,
Thanks, Brad.
and a lot of IT people speak in tongues, and they wrap
Yeah,
themselves in robes, and, you know,
yeah.
they want to have that power, and that was that culture I inherited where people wanted to I mean, they wouldn't be proactive, they just wait till things broke and then swoop in and be the hero.
Mm,
It's like, no. Yeah. I wanna reward being proactive, and, yeah, when things break, you need to respond, but, I had a network engineer who was brilliant, and it was hard for him to learn to get out and meet with his customers, and I actually gave him a career coach who
mm.
helped kinda round out his elbows so they weren't so sharp, and that worked really well for him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you're onto something here because I've mentioned this on this show before. It's one of the points that I make that we are in an environment where people are a lot more lonely and isolated than maybe ever
Mhm.
before. And Vivek Murthy, our current or exiting Surgeon General, is making that his point of view to focus on versus obesity or diabetes or what have you. It's loneliness and isolation. And so if you have that as a backdrop, that's the subtext that a lot of us are feeling. And then you come in and say, we need to create relationships. We need to create authentic connection. It becomes a breath of fresh air. It becomes
Mhm.
water to a person who's really thirsty. We need that, but we've gotten sort of used to the new normal virtual and lack of connection between people. I had a facilitation with a group a while back, and somebody said, "I just don't feel comfortable doing this. But if you had me do this activity maybe 2 years ago before COVID, I would have been fine, but I've sort of been like a turtle, and I pulled my
Yeah.
head in, and I forgot how to connect. I
Well,
forgot how to have these conversations, and it sort of bothers me. I'm hearing this from people."
and just inertia, it's so easy to hide behind your screen and
Yes.
hide in your office. When I first got to the university, I met with this professor I'd worked with 15 years earlier, electrical engineer, been there 40 years, really crusty dude. And I said, "Okay, give me some advice." He goes, "Get out of the office and tell people you give a damn." And that
I
was
love that.
that was the best advice, don't hide in your office. Get
That's
out there
awesome.
and, I met with the VP for public safety. It was a matter of not if something would go wrong, but when it would go wrong and how do we
Yeah.
work together to solve it? And
Well,
we
and I do
would
I think you see keep I keep thinking about your world that feels very much B2B, or you have external customers and so forth. You're selling something, you're selling a service like Accenture. But I don't think that people who are not in that space, they've got a job, they're doing some work, they're in, I don't know, they have an internal focused position, right? You might
Mhm,
go like, I'm here to get work done. I'm not here to network, because networking is more for those salespeople. You know, we already I am not involved in bringing on a new client. That's somebody else's job. I'm the one who now execute on what the external salesperson is doing for the company. So now I'm taking what they've sold. Hopefully we can do it. They didn't overpromise, and then I'm going to help actually make this a reality, and we can see, our revenue go up or what have you. I don't need the network. I'm the doer. I am not the smoozer. You think everybody
yeah.
should take on a little bit of that networking job description?
Well, you can't do your job alone, and
You
if you're
mm,
trying to deliver for a client, you often have to work with your peers in the organization, and if
yeah,
you don't know who your peers are and frankly don't care about them, they won't care about you,
that's a
and,
great point.
you need to really, so we built a $32 million data center. My predecessor worked very poorly with the organization that was building the data center. And, it's like I went out there, apologized for that past bad behavior, and said, "I want to be the best partner you ever had. And I want to work together. If I delay a decision, let me know." Um, you can't just hide in your silo.
No, no, you really can't. And it does seem to be that in this interesting time that we are walking our way through, Brad, is
Hmm.
that we are craving, and we can almost become a differentiator by
Yeah.
providing people what you might call human experiences, not
Hmm.
AI generated. How many times are you seeing things on TikTok or something to do with technology, and you go like, is that really was that really created, or
Yeah.
was that a make believe AI tool that created this image, this video that doesn't feel like it's real? So now we're having to question, what is reality, what is
Hmm.
authenticity, what is the real person, and so now if you take on, I'm putting words in your mouth, right? Is to say, let's create some real human experiences. Yes, we'll continue to use AI and all the other things because they're great tools,
Sure.
but we have to hold on to what is human, not for just the survival of the species, but because people are hungry for it. We want to
Right.
have those connections.
And frankly, it's more rewarding.
Yes.
If you can help somebody, you feel good about that. I had a
Yeah.
woman call me who had been a client years ago. I hadn't talked to her in 15 years, but when we connected, it was like we had never stopped talking to each other. We
Right.
just had that trust and everything. She goes, "Well, my son's applying for a job at the university. He's an attorney. Would you talk to him?" It's like I met her son when he was 5 years old.
Oh
It's
my
like he's an
God.
attorney now.
Wow.
And I said, of course I'll talk to him.
Yeah.
And,
No. Yeah.
I gave him some tips and he got the job,
I
so decades can go
I
by and you can still reconnect.
totally. And I'm always like, whenever I'm traveling, I'm trying to have dinner with somebody, not that, I mean, yes, you need time by yourself to recoup from whatever you've been doing, but you just never know. And quite frankly, I'm curious about people. I find them fascinating, and I love to find out what's going on. And if nothing comes from that conversation, that wasn't the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation was to
Mm,
connect it at some point. If it turns into something great, if it doesn't, it doesn't. So there's one
right.
other quick activity I remember somebody walking me through, and maybe this is something that the listeners can walk themselves through as well. But in this idea about networking, I remember being in a conference and somebody said, "Okay, everybody pull out their phones," which was unusual because normally they tell you to put your phones away, which I can
Mhm,
understand why. Think about a person with whom you really like and care for, but you haven't been in touch with for maybe several months, maybe even several years, and
mhm,
take about 2 minutes to write them a text and tell them how much
mhm.
you miss them, appreciate them, and what value they put into your life and so forth. So everyone's doing that. And then all of a sudden, the faces start to light up because they're getting responses, and it changed the
Sure.
entire room. We had like 700, 800 people in the room.
Wow.
So those who are listening, if you're driving, don't do it now, but think about a person with whom you haven't been in contact with for a long period of time that you really wish you did. They were an
Mhm.
important part of your life, but spend a minute texting them, tell them that, and see how that rekindles that old relationship. Yeah. So
It's not
Brad,
that hard.
tell me about the book, man. You got a few out there, but what's your latest and greatest, and what's the main points that we might look forward to when we read it?
Well, the Spheres of Influence is the name of the book, How to Create and Nurture Authentic Business Relationships. And I have 40 years of stories on relationships with your boss, direct reports, customers, vendors. I changed the names to protect the guilty parties, and no companies have been named.
Yeah.
But, it's really designed to help people early in their career or mid-career, um, have a more rewarding experience. And someone said, they really don't teach this in business school. And
Mm,
a lot of people my vintage are giving the book to their adult children and say, read this book. You
mm,
need to understand the importance of building relationships. So I've just enjoyed the feedback. It's a Amazon bestseller in three categories:
mm,
leadership training, mentoring and coaching, and customer relations, which were my target areas. And so I've been enjoying doing podcasts. I have workshops that I help people do some role playing to kind of exercise these muscles.
mm.
And it's been a lot of fun.
Um, that's great, man. That is really great. And the workshop piece can how can people find out about that? Could you maybe mention your website or other ways in which to connect with you, LinkedIn or whatever you might be a part of when it comes to social media?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. And I'll be posting about the workshops. I can do them virtually, so um, I can do it over Zoom, and so you don't have to even fly me out anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's so there are two workshops. One's like a 1 hour interactive session. The other is a half day session for like sales teams who want to change from transactional selling to relationship selling. Um, so a couple of options out there. I'm going to send you a link to
Hmm.
my website that you can put in the
Okay.
show notes. That'll have a free sample of the book, how to buy the book, and a tab on how to schedule time on my calendar.
Oh, fantastic. We look forward to that. The thing that just struck me as you were saying that, um, Brad, was you're right. We don't teach this, in business school or in even high school, or when you even get into a company and they do the onboarding.
Hmm.
Here's what the HR form number 44 you need to sign. And this, you go through all of that, but there's nothing about how do you develop relationships within this company and how do you network and develop relationships with the external relationships that we have, vendors and,
Yeah.
and people that we want to sell to. So I think you're really it's an obvious thing. It's
Yeah.
not rocket science. It's something we've heard
No.
about, but when you start to dig into it, like I am with you now, you kind of go like, where do you go to learn this stuff? You just
Hmm.
rely on a personality type. Okay, I happen to be a gregarious, outgoing person. I'll be fine with this, maybe. Or somebody who's not, maybe more introvert, may not be. But how do you then help all of those people get better at developing these relationships? I think that's what you're doing.
Yep,
So,
that's right.
yeah, well, thank you for your time on this. This has been a great conversation, and I wish you all the best of success with your book.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newland. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.